Hey everyone, remember those photos of like crystal clear water in Venetias during lockdown, like that whole nature is healing thing?
Yeah.
Well, get ready for a kind of plot twist
Okay.
because today's deep dive is about a place that's kind of famous for, well, not being crystal clear.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking New York City's harbor.
Okay.
Yeah, the Hudson, the East River, all those waterways. We're going to dive deep into this surprising comeback of marine life in these like once notoriously polluted waters.
Wow.
You might be thinking, wait, whales in the Hudson, dolphins like splashing around near the Brooklyn Bridge.
Right?
And it sounds crazy, but get this. Government reports, recent news articles, even scientific studies all point to the same thing. NYC's water quality is the best it's been in over a century.
Wow.
So today we're going to cut through all the noise to uncover the how and the why behind this amazing transformation. And to help us do that, we have an expert joining us today. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about this. It's pretty wild, honestly. The data is remarkable. For decades, NYC's waterways were basically synonymous with pollution. Like even movies, they use them to represent grime and decay.
Oh, totally. Like, who could forget that scene in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles where they're living in the sewers? It always makes me think of New York.
Right.
But seriously, we're talking about massive, massive amounts of sewage being dumped into these waterways. Like, how bad was it really?
Oh, it was way more than just a visual thing in the movies. Like it was a major ecological crisis.
Wow.
We're talking a staggering 21 billion gallons of raw sewage being discharged annually.
Oh my
To
God.
give you a sense of scale, that's enough to fill the Empire State Building, wait for it, 72 times.
That's insane.
And this wasn't just, some unfortunate accident. It was a direct result of the city's aging infrastructure, specifically its combined sewer systems.
Okay, so for those of us who aren't civil engineers, what's the deal with combined sewers? Like, what makes them so problematic?
Yeah, so good question. In a nutshell, combined sewer systems, they combine sewage from homes and businesses with stormwater runoff.
Okay.
So it sounds efficient, right?
Efficient.
But the problem is, during heavy rainfall, the volume of water and everything in it, it just becomes totally overwhelming. The treatment plants can't handle it all, and it leads to what we call combined sewer overflows, or CSOs.
CSOs.
Yeah, so essentially all that excess wastewater, including, untreated sewage, it bypasses the treatment process and is discharged directly into the harbor and surrounding waterways.
So basically, it's like flushing. Well, you get the idea.
Basically, yeah.
No wonder those rivers used to have such a bad reputation.
Yeah.
But you mentioned things are changing. Like, where do we even start with that turnaround? What happened?
Well, a really pivotal moment was the passage of the Clean Water Act in 1972. This landmark legislation, it set national water quality standards, and it provided some funding for wastewater treatment plant upgrades. So New York City, despite, its size and the scale of the problem, they started making significant investments in their infrastructure to comply with the act.
Okay.
These efforts, combined with increased public awareness about the importance of clean water, these were really the first steps in this long journey toward recovery.
So the Clean Water Act was like a wake-up call for cities like New York.
Yeah, exactly.
It's encouraging to see how much progress has been made since then.
Yeah, absolutely.
But like, how do we actually know the water is getting cleaner? Are there scientists constantly out there taking samples?
You're on the right track.
Okay.
The city actually has a dedicated team of scientists who monitor the harbor's water quality.
Wow.
They use a specially equipped research vessel called the Osprey.
Oh, okay.
It's like a floating laboratory.
Okay, now that's just cool. A floating lab. I'm picturing scientists in lab coats, like analyzing water samples right there on the deck.
Pretty much.
What kind of things are they measuring?
So they're analyzing all sorts of parameters, but one of the most important is bacteria levels,
Okay.
especially those that indicate fecal contamination.
Right, from all that, yeah.
Exactly. Remember those CSOs we talked about?
Yeah.
High levels of certain bacteria tell us if there's been a recent overflow. They also measure dissolved oxygen levels, which are crucial for marine life.
Yeah.
The lower the dissolved oxygen, the harder it is for fish and other organisms to breathe. Think of it like trying to breathe in a stuffy room.
Right, yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah,
So it sounds like they're keeping a close eye on the water.
they really are, yeah.
But you mentioned that the harbor is the cleanest it's been in over a century. How do they know that?
Well, they compare their data to historical records. Believe it or not, New York City has been collecting water quality data for over 100 years.
Wow, that's a long time.
They've got this incredible database that allows them to track trends over time.
Wow, that's really impressive.
Yeah,
So based on that data, the harbor is truly making a comeback.
it really is.
Mm.
But what makes this story truly remarkable is not just the data, but what it's allowing to happen. The cleaner water is creating a healthier ecosystem, and we're seeing the return of something truly special, marine life.
This is what I love about these deep dives. Like, you never know what you're going to find. So the water is cleaner, and that's brought back what kind of marine life are we talking about here?
Get this, we're talking everything from harbor seals basking on rocks near the Statue of Liberty to dolphins chasing fish up the East River.
Dolphins. Seriously, in the East River, I
Yeah.
would not have believed it. This is giving me hope that maybe, just maybe, those nature is healing memes aren't so far off after all.
Yeah, it's true.
So it's not just dolphins.
No, not at all. There have been multiple sightings of humpback whales feeding near the Verrazano Bridge.
Really? Which is just, I mean, that's mind-blowing when you think about how busy that waterway is.
Pretty incredible.
Whales feeding near one of the busiest bridges in the world, that's an image I've got to wrap my head around.
Right.
So how does this even work? The water gets a little cleaner and suddenly we have whales setting up shop in New York Harbor. What's the connection there?
Well, it all comes down to the food chain.
Okay.
See, cleaner water, it leads to a resurgence of phytoplankton and zooplankton, which are the base of the marine food web.
Right.
This abundance attracts smaller fish, like menhaden.
Okay.
And where there are lots of menhaden, you're bound to find hungry predators like whales and dolphins, looking for a meal.
So it's like a ripple effect. Cleaner water creates this whole chain reaction that brings life back to the harbor.
Exactly.
It's incredible. But you mentioned something earlier about ship strikes. Is that a concern with more whales and dolphins in these busy waterways?
It's definitely something to watch out for. A recent study by Rutgers University found that humpback whales, in particular, are spending more time in the New York Bight, an area that includes the harbor and surrounding waters, and are even returning year after year.
Wow, so they're sticking around.
They are. And while this is, fantastic news for the whales and for the harbor's ecosystem,
Yeah.
it does mean there's an increased risk of collisions with ships, especially in such a heavily trafficked port.
Right. That makes sense. More whales plus more ships equals a higher chance of something going wrong. Are there ways to, like, mitigate that risk?
There are, yeah. Some organizations are advocating for speed restrictions in certain areas, particularly during peak whale migration seasons.
Okay.
There's also been talk of using technology, like underwater microphones, to track whale movements and alert ships to their presence in real time.
Wow. That's really cool, actually.
It is pretty neat.
It sounds like finding that balance between celebrating the return of these animals and protecting them in such a busy urban environment is going to be like a continuous process.
Yeah, it definitely will be,
Yeah.
but it's a good problem to have.
It's a good problem to have, exactly. I mean, I'll take whales in New York Harbor any day.
Me too.
But while the return of marine life is such a fantastic sign, it's important to remember that the fight for cleaner water in New York City is far from over.
That's right.
There are still significant challenges ahead, right?
There are, yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about the progress, but what about the obstacles? What are the biggest issues still facing the harbor today?
Well, we've already discussed the combined sewer overflow system, which continues to be a major source of pollution. Even with the progress made since the Clean Water Act, these overflows still occur regularly, especially during heavy rain.
Right, those outdated systems haven't magically disappeared overnight.
Exactly. And then there are emerging contaminants like microplastics and pharmaceuticals, which are increasingly being detected in the water.
Oh, wow, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
So those are pretty new.
They are relatively new, yeah, and these are complex challenges that require innovative solutions and ongoing research.
So what's being done to address these issues? Are there any, like, promising solutions on the horizon?
Well, one positive development is the increasing use of green infrastructure.
Okay.
This involves implementing natural solutions like rain gardens and green roofs to absorb stormwater runoff before it reaches the sewer system.
Oh, okay, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's a more sustainable and environmentally friendly approach compared to traditional, like, gray infrastructure.
Right, right. That sounds promising. But what about the regulatory side of things? Are there any laws or policies in place to protect the harbor aside from, what we talked about?
There are, and this is where things get interesting.
Okay.
I've talked about the Clean Water Act, but there's also ongoing debate about setting even stricter water quality standards for New York Harbor.
Okay.
Specifically, there's a push to make the harbor swimmable,
Swimmable.
meaning the water quality is safe enough for regular swimming.
Wait, you're telling me you can't swim in New York Harbor? I mean, I wouldn't necessarily jump in right now, but I thought things were getting better.
It's complicated.
Okay.
There are designated swimming areas that are monitored for bacteria levels,
Okay.
but even those are often closed after heavy rainfall because of those pesky CSOs we talked about.
Right, right.
The idea of making the entire harbor swimmable is a complex one with, significant implications.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's one thing to make the water safe for marine life, but making it safe enough for humans to swim in regularly is a whole other ballgame.
It really is.
So who's pushing for these, like, stricter standards?
Organizations like Riverkeeper, a nonprofit environmental advocacy group, have been at the forefront of this effort.
Okay.
They argue that a swimmable harbor is not only achievable, but essential for the health and well-being of New Yorkers and the ecosystem.
So they're trying to hold the city accountable for making the water truly clean, not just cleaner.
Exactly.
But this isn't just about swimming, right? I'm guessing there's a bigger picture here.
You're right. For Riverkeeper and other advocates, the fight for swimmable water is about more than just recreation.
Okay.
It's about environmental justice, public health, and the right to clean water for all New Yorkers.
Right, so everyone has access.
Exactly.
Got it.
They argue that a truly healthy harbor should be accessible to everyone, not just those living in wealthier neighborhoods or those who can afford to, travel outside the city for clean water activities.
It's amazing how something we often take for granted, like clean water, can be so interconnected with so many other aspects of our lives, from public health to social equity.
Absolutely, and that's why this work of groups like Riverkeepers is so important.
Right.
They're not just advocating for cleaner water, they're pushing for a more just and equitable future for all New Yorkers.
Yeah.
But as you can imagine, there are different perspectives on how to achieve that.
Right. Because not everyone's going to agree on what swimmable even means in practice.
Exactly.
Right.
Some argue that the costs associated with upgrading the sewer system to meet those standards would be astronomical and might not even be feasible, given the city's complex infrastructure. There are concerns that these costs could lead to higher taxes or cuts in other essential services.
So it's a balancing act between protecting the environment and managing the practical realities of living in a megacity like New York.
It is.
What are some of the arguments against making the harbor swimmable?
Well, some critics argue that this focus on swimmable water, it sets an unrealistic goal.
Okay.
They say that New York Harbor, given its history and its function as a major working port, will never be a pristine swimming hole,
Right.
and that resources would be better spent on, more achievable improvements to water quality.
I see. So there's this tension between the idealists who want to see kids, like, doing cannonballs off piers,
Right.
and those who see it as a fantasy that distracts from more, I guess, pragmatic solutions.
Yeah.
It sounds like a classic New York debate.
It really does, yeah. And like most complex issues, there's no easy answer.
Right.
It's going to require ongoing dialogue, collaboration, and a willingness to find, common ground.
Yeah. It's a good reminder that even when we see progress, like the return of whales and dolphins to New York Harbor, the journey is far from over.
It's true.
What does the future hold for the harbor? Will we ever see a day when people can just jump in for a swim without a second thought?
It's hard to say for sure, but I think what's most important is that the conversation has shifted.
Okay.
We're no longer debating whether or not clean water is important.
Right.
We're discussing how to achieve it and what level of cleanliness we're aiming for.
Right.
That in itself is a sign of progress.
So while the future of New York Harbor might still be a bit murky, the fact that we're having these discussions, that organizations like Riverkeepers are pushing for change, that's a reason for optimism.
Absolutely. Public awareness and engagement are crucial. The more people understand the issues, the more likely we are to see real and lasting change.
This deep dive has been eye-opening. It's incredible to think that a place once synonymous with pollution is now home to whales, dolphins, and a whole host of other marine life.
I know, it's pretty amazing.
But as we've learned, there's still work to be done. The future of New York Harbor isn't just about scientific data and regulations, it's about how we as New Yorkers and as citizens of the planet choose to value and protect our waterways for generations to come. So the next time you're strolling along the waterfront, take a moment to appreciate the progress that's been made, but also consider what you can do to ensure that those waters continue to get cleaner and healthier. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into New York City's amazing aquatic comeback story. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.
If you enjoy this video, help us to continue producing the content you love by subscribing to our channel and pressing the like button.